Hello everyone, Blue here, and welcome to something that I'm going to try out for at least a few episodes that I'm dubbing TF2 Storytime. I have quite a few hours in this game, and I've accumulated quite a few stories over that time with nowhere to really tell them, so I thought, screw it, I'll try something new. So the story I decided to kick off the series with is the story of a server owned by a guy I used to be good friends with named Anubis. When I first met Anubis, or Recital as he went by at the time, it was on a trade Minecraft server that I used to frequent. At that point, we really didn't like each other that much. I think we somehow both thought the other person was a tryhard, which I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but both of us did eventually realize that the other person was pretty cool, and we ended up hitting it off pretty well at that point. Fast forward to around April or May of 2015, when Anubis started to have beef with a few of the admins on the trade server I mentioned earlier. I never heard the full story of what actually happened to prompt this, but it was bad enough that Anubis decided that he was sick of the admins and wanted to make his own trade server to compete with the current one. Now, for those of you who would recognize the name, the server that we were on at that point was a fire-friendly server. If you don't recognize the name, Fire-Friendly is a huge network of servers that had incredible maintenance and a large following. So when Anubis announced that his new server would be in direct competition with the current one, there were a few people that were interested, but it was mostly just laughed at and told it would never succeed. But out of the people who laughed at it, there were two that were especially obnoxious about it. These two were named Omar and Glacy. Now, I don't know exactly what prompted this, but they were both determined to make sure Anubis' server never took off. I've seen a lot of pricks in my day, but these guys were a pair of cacti. One of the things they did before the server was even created was adding Anubis on Steam and spamming DMs to him that basically told him that he was a failure. But Anubis, undiscouraged, decided to go through with making the server. I remember the first day he made it and was trying to set it up, he invited me on to help him pick out some source mods to add. At that point, the server ran some CP Orange variant, so we didn't exactly have people flocking to the server straight away, but after a few weeks or so, we had a small following of about 10 people on the server at any given time. So enter Omar and Glacy. They joined the server and made it their goal to be as annoying as physically possible. Anubis was going to just ban them, but due to some kind of divine intervention, the ban source mod that he had set up didn't work properly. So every time they came on the server, he had to just repeatedly kick them, and they were loving every second of it. Eventually, though, Omar got bored and told Anubis that he would stop being annoying if Anubis could beat him in a duel. Unfortunately for Omar, while the ban plugin didn't work, Anubis and I still had an arsenal of random commands at our disposal. So Anubis accepts the challenge and immediately turns on increased speed, crits, and custom weapons for both of us. We then proceeded to achieve a record salt harvest with both Omar and Glacy complaining the entire time they were getting killed. After about 20 minutes of them getting wrecked over and over, they finally gave up and left, and we had won the day. We kept the CP Orange map for another few months, but before I completely move on to the next part of the story, I do want to mention a small thing that did happen in the meantime. During some random day in late May, we were both on the server with a pretty good amount of people on there with us. We were kind of bored, and Anubis asked what we should do to spice things up a little. A lot of people said Saxton Hail or add grappling hooks or whatever, but some guy who had never been on the server until that day said set SV cheats to 1. Now, I was kind of on board because I wanted to mess around with ad cons, so I said, yeah, let's do it. Now let me give you a piece of advice. If you have a server that's public and you want to set SV cheats to 1, don't. Almost immediately after doing this, the guy changes all of the skybox textures to lava, spawns in about 50 Marasmuses, and started deleting everyone with the int remove command. I actually still have a screenshot that I took while the server was in the process of crashing. The server had been running for a solid few months with its ups and downs, but in around October of 2015, we decided to move from CP Orange to a really cool looking map called like Trade Hyrule or something that was modeled after the map in Ocarina of Time. I was more or less the co-owner of the server up until the point where I took around a month break from TF2 in late November. When I came back in late December, the server had grown quite a bit. I was reinstated admin privileges, but due to the amount of time I was gone for, I didn't really rank above any of the other few admins that he'd hired. The server was honestly a blast at this point. Anubis would regularly do events in random parts of the map, and it wasn't really uncommon for a server to have the maximum amount of people connected. Omar and Glacy would still occasionally come onto the server and be obnoxious, but it seems like they'd mostly accepted the server's success because it was more playful and lighthearted at that point. Anubis' server was honestly one of my favorite servers to play on back in the day, and I still look back fondly on the days that it was in this state. But I talk in the past tense because it was around January that Anubis started to get a little bit greedy. At first, it was fairly innocent. He was only like 15, so he actually didn't have the means to support the server in terms of income. A few regulars and one of the admins offered to donate to him, and this is when he put a donator system in place. It was a fairly standard system. You gave a donation of, say, 3 keys per month, and you had access to perks like Friendly, Resize, and a bunch of other harmless stuff. This donation system ended up working pretty well, because not only did he end up being able to pay for the server, he actually made most of the money that he'd already spent on the server back. But with decent income came the temptation of major profits. Anubis ended up creating a VIP tier donator for 10 keys a month that granted perks to your actual gameplay. Now, it wasn't like people were sweating their balls off trying to get kills, but there was a fair amount of combat going on, so this became very annoying to those without the perks. But this wasn't even the most egregious thing that happened. A week later, Anubis had announced that you could pay the price of about 40 keys, I actually don't remember what the actual number was, but it was high, to become a fully fledged admin. I had personally talked to Anubis about reconsidering this decision since many of the people who expressed interest in doing this were irresponsible, but he refused to budge, so I ended up throwing in the towel and did quit as the admin at that point. And I'm glad I jumped ship when I did. Anubis had apparently already made the decision that he didn't want to run a server anymore, and he took the money and ran. 2 people ended up buying admin and were able to exercise their power for all of a week before the server just suddenly shut down. Anubis had apparently gotten into high-tier unusual trading with the money given to him, and he bought a Morning Glory Hong Kong cone worth a little over 200 keys. And since nearly all of his inventory value was in this one item, he didn't have any liquidity, so he refused to give refunds on VIP or admin purchases. Well, word of this got passed down the grapevine, and the amount of backlash he faced upon re-entering the trade server was nothing short of spectacular. I think he actually did end up selling his unusual and refunding the money because one of the trade server admins threatened to ban him if he didn't, but my memory on that is a little foggy, so I'm not entirely sure. It was probably July of 2016 when Anubis decided that he wanted to run another server, but this time for Saxton Hale instead of trading. I say probably because I couldn't find exactly when the server went up, but I do know that the group for it was founded on July 30th, so that's when I'll be using the dates. Anubis and I had forgiven each other at this point, but we weren't exactly close, so getting admin for the new server was practically out of the question, and even if he did offer it, I probably would have declined. I was already playing on another Saxton Hale server called Beerheads at the time, so I didn't end up visiting his Adventure Isles server much, but whenever I did visit, he seemed to kind of have some high tensions with me. For whatever reason, his server attracted a lot of children, many of which who were fairly talkative. Now, if you've ever seen the rest of my channel, you have a fairly good idea what my feelings toward annoying kids are. I tried to trick one of the kids who was on Adventure Isles and was literally screaming into his mic into binding his talk key into quitting the game, but Anubis was strongly against me doing that. I didn't know why at the time, but he eventually told me that he hates the way I deal with children and that everyone on the internet should be respected equally. I told him I'd be fine with doing that if the admins were actually willing to mute said kids, but for whatever reason he didn't want to do that and threatened to ban me if I kept trolling them. And ultimately, this is where the story of me and Anubis ends. We really didn't talk much outside of the times we saw each other on that Minecraft trade server, but when we did talk it wasn't even hostile, just distant. The last time I actually saw Anubis was on that trade server about a month before it got shut down. As for Adventurer's Isle, I'd not really ever visited since he threatened me with a ban, but it apparently has been running pretty solidly for the past 2 years, although it did at one point get rebranded to Nintendo Freak Fortress. Nowadays, Anubis no longer owns Nintendo Freak Fortress. I actually talked to the current owner of it on Discord, and he made the official transfer in late March of this year. According to Anubis' profile, he himself does custom modeling for the Source engine on commission, but he no longer plays Team Fortress 2. I would like to say that if you're one of the people from Friendly Fire who remembers this as it happened, or if you're Anubis himself, which would actually be really cool, feel free to correct me in the comments on any details I may have misremembered. I only had a little bit of information to work with when I was making this video, and the rest of the details were from memory, so it is possible that I got the dates or minor details of events I wasn't involved in wrong. I also would like to say that I currently have no drama with anyone I mentioned in this video, since it was over 3 years ago when it all happened. In fact, I don't even think I've talked to most of the people in this video since it all went down. As far as this video and this series go, this is entirely experimental, and it's more of a way for me to perfect my storytelling abilities in a concise and interesting manner. If you have any feedback, let me know, since I'm still trying to decide whether or not to do more videos like this. And oh, I did want to mention that yes, I did get a new microphone. It is officially mine. I am no longer borrowing one, so the bad mic that you've heard in previous videos is gone. Insert the crab dance. Anyway, this video is at an end, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.